You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Let's get you across the Tasman. Our regular Australian correspondent Saturday afternoons is Adam Peacock. Codesports.com.au is where you can read his excellent copy. And you can listen to him every Saturday here with us. Adam, thanks for taking the time as always. We've just been talking stadiums over this side of the ditch, and the AFL is coming to Tasmania.
Yeah, this is as much a win for Tasmanian football, who, if you're not across the geography of Australia, Tassie has long been an afterthought for professional sport, especially the footy codes in this country, and AFL, that weird sport that we play over here in Australia, is the main thing on that island, but they've never been viewed as viable enough to have a professional team down there until now. But the AFL have basically said, we're not going down there until all the governments around the joint, the state and the federal, help us chip in some coin to build a proper stadium down there, and that's what they've got. So it's a win for Tasmanian football, but it's also a win again for the political pull that the AFL organisation have here in Australia.
So if they've got to build a new venue, what sort of time frame are we talking here, Adam? When will a Tasmanian team join the AFL?
Yeah, you're looking at a couple of years at least. So they've got to get the funding, then they've got to do the architecture, they've got to do the building. I'm not sure where along the line they are, if they've been doing that concurrently while they've been chasing the funding. But yeah, you'd imagine it's 2-3 years. I've had a look at the spec. It's a little like the Cape Tin, what they've kind of come up with. It's a waterfront in an area that's not really well populated at the moment, so it's not out of the way, but it's central enough, but it's not inconvenient to the existing infrastructure in Hobart. It's on the waterfront there, but I can't imagine it's a quick turnaround.
How attractive would Tasmania be for the sport's top players? Because obviously they'll need to populate a team with some pretty decent players. Are guys going to up sticks from Victoria in particular and move to Tasmania?
Yeah, I think they'll be okay with that. Like, there's a lot of good footy players that come from country areas, and Tassie's a bit like that. It's like Hobart's only a town of 250,000, so it's not a bustling metropolis. So if they can target the right type of players who don't want to go to a big city and get carried away with, life in a city of 6 million, well, it could be the go. But it's going to be a factor for sure, because the attractiveness of playing in Melbourne is multifaceted, not just with the football. It's what you can earn outside the football, your lifestyle as well. So, yeah, it's going to be an element, definitely.
All right, let's move on to cricket. Plenty of developments in T20 cricket. A number of IPL outfits have begun chatting with the world's leading players about wider involvement on their rosters. As we know, there are a number of T20 leagues popping up around the world now. What effect is this going to have on Australia's top players?
Yeah, it's the modern day World Series cricket for mine. It's going to turn cricket as we know it on its head, I think, in the next year or so, with how countries look. The top players from countries outside England, India and Australia, I reckon they're all going to struggle to be playing the full calendar of international matches for their country. We've seen it with you guys, with Trent Boult, for instance. That is going to be the norm for the countries outside the Big Three, and the Big Three are going to have an issue with their senior players, like a David Warner or a one-day specialist like a Marcus Stoinis, who's probably not going to break into the Test team. They're just going to be ripe for the picking for this concept, which basically makes T20 players club players above country players, if you know what I mean. So it's a little bit like the infrastructure around football or rugby union. You play for your province or you play for your club or whatever you call it, and then if you get selected, and if it fits in, you play for your country. So, yeah, it's going to change cricket, I would say, hugely, and something will have to give on the international calendar, and it could be 50 over cricket.
Yeah, and that's the conversation over here as well. So is it likely then that players who are offered Australian central contracts will actually say, you know what, I won't take that. I'm available when available, but otherwise I'm making money, in other places.
Definitely. Yeah, it's going to be a negotiation. It's not going to be I'll sign the central contract and I'll worry about the rest later. It's going to be what's good for me. And it's fair enough too. The central contract here in Australia, the top one I think is just over $2 million, and that's for the captain. Now, an IPL franchise, you play all year round. Well, if Cam Green's getting $3 million for 6 weeks' work in the IPL, you pro-rata that with, if you throw in 3 other competitions, why aren't you looking at $6-7 million a year for someone like Cam Green? Now, he's never going to make that on a central contract. And, you got the heartstrings pulling you towards the Australian badge, but what else? Not much. He's going to set himself up and his family for life. So, yeah, they've got a major issue looming, some of the bigger countries, and an even bigger issue for the countries that just can't offer that kind of money with central contracts.
Such an interesting time. And the A-League Men's is reaching its climax, final regular season round this weekend, and then the final start next weekend. Last night, the top 4, just by a quirk of the draw, played one another. Melbourne City beating Western Sydney in the last minute 3-2, and Central Coast going to Adelaide and winning 4-1 to secure second spot. So Melbourne City, Central Coast, Adelaide, Western Sydney are the top 4 in that order. Wellington have to try and get a result at Macarthur tonight to sneak into the top 6. Have you caught any of the Phoenix, or have you stopped watching?
No, it's hard to watch the Phoenix because I'm always at the last 4 weeks or something like that. They've played the same time. Apart from I did watch them play Western Sydney and get well beaten, but apart from that, they've been playing the same time as my son, so I've only seen highlights. But I reckon the Knicks have done well if they make the finals, which they pretty much should, unless a complete disaster happens. That's a good season, and it's a nice way for Ufi Tallow to go out, and hopefully they can build on that next season. They don't have to change much. The way that Ufi's kind of managed things in the last couple of years through the pandemic has been more than admirable. So I think that they'll be one and done when they get to the finals. Although if they play Adelaide were pretty off the pace last night and exposed by Central Coast. Central Coast, the storylines out of last night, the fallout is Central Coast, amazing. Like, they're just showing teams below them, the bigger clubs, how to do things. You can develop players and get results at the same time. You can walk and chew gum. So they've done incredibly well. It's the big story for the season, although Melbourne City have had this success. And the other one is that we've set ourselves up for a Sydney derby next week in the first week of the finals, which is, I think the APL would be a little relieved about something like that. But, Central Coast for mine have just been magnificent, and the second place finish is testament to their planning and execution. Yeah,
what a story. Great to chat as always, Adam. Thanks for updating us on Australian sporting issues. We'll do it all again next Saturday.
Cheers, Piney. Good luck to the Knicks.
They might need it, mate. Adam Peacock, codesports.com.au, our regular Saturday chat with our Australian correspondent.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday, or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.
Hello, I'm Liam Dan, Business Editor-at-Large for the New Zealand Herald, and I'm back with another season of my podcast, Money Talks. In this series, we're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. Instead, I'll be talking to some interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. Join us every Saturday for a new chat with an exciting range of guests from the world of business, politics and entertainment. You can find Money Talks with me, Liam Dan, wherever you get your podcasts.